So Exploratory online seminar number 41. Today, I'd like to cover introduction to Exploratory version 6.5. All right, so let's get started. So the area of the new features and enhancements in version 6.5 are in this area: the project and the summary view, analytics, chart, data wrangling, and then data source. So let's go one by one, starting with the project. And this is really for existing Exploratory users, and especially for users who been using Exploratory for a long time. Therefore, they have imported tons of data into Exploratory, and it started becoming a little harder to manage. And so we wanted to do something about it. So first, I think I'm going to start the demo by doing this instead of going through the slides. I'm going to share that later. Anyway, so here's the Exploratory, and then you can open that project. And then once you open the project, as you see, like I have a bunch of data frames and a dashboard and so on, left-hand side. And sometimes there are some like data frames, kind of like a longer name, and I have a bigger window. Therefore, like I might want to increase adjust the width of left-hand side. So, it depends, like, you might want to have a smaller one and a bigger one. So I'm going to just keep it like this side. So that's number one. This now is adjustable. And then the second thing, I have tons of data frames. So how can I find it? So for example, like, do I have something about the sales? And then I can just type it. And then not only type and find, but also when you move the mouse, and you can see all the charts that in the data frame. So for example, I'm going to just find something like employee data. And then here, like I have a bunch of charts. And also not only the charts, now there is a tab of the chart and analytics. So when you go to the analytics, then you can see what analytics you have as well. And then the cool thing about this, all of these, you can just click on it to directly open. So you don't have to go to the open the data frame and find the chart. You can actually find it and then open right away. And something like, for example, I have, if I type like a Dakota, because I think like I know I created the chart about South Dakota's COVID cases, and no, not COVID, it's actually unemployment. And then like, I can find it, but even though data frame doesn't have the Dakota, but if the chart has something like a Dakota, and then that data frame itself will be shown on the left-hand side with all the charts under the same data frame. And then when you have a bunch of charts, before it used to be, I think it was like showing like 16s and then others kind of, but now it shows all the charts. So you can scroll up and down as well. Then like obviously, like you can just find something you want to open and then right away. Okay, so that is the left-hand side. And I think this is I hope this is a good improvement. So that's one thing. And then the next topic is, let me see. I want to make sure I cover all that stuff. Okay, let's go. Next thing is, so for example, this one, I have tons of charts, and then maybe like analytics as well. And also like I have a branch. And then before, if let's say like if I, as you know, like I have a bunch of data frames left-hand side, and I just want to clean up and I want to I want to start fresh. So I want to create a new project, and then maybe move some of the data frames, one by one or whatever. And how can I do that? So before, you could export the EDF. So let's say, for example, here there's like a down arrow icon, and then you can export. Where is it? Here, EDF. And what this is going to do is to create an EDF file, and then you can import EDF into different project or whatever, or some other people's exploratory environment. And that will reproduce the data. Or if you export it, for example, this chart, and that will reproduce the chart. That means any steps that are required to generate this chart, including branches or other data frames, that will get all packaged up in the EDF. So that was that we call it EDF, but an exploratory data format. But sometimes, not just reproducing, it's the chart or particular analytics or particular dashboard or whatever. Instead, you want to just simply export this data frame. That means this data frame and also underlying branches and all the charts and then maybe like even all the analytics tabs. And if that is what you like to do, then you can actually export that data frame itself. So if I export this and then if I save it, and then I'm going to just save it. Obviously, I have exported before. And if I go to, oops, if I go to a different project, let's say like if I created a new project, and then I can import that data frame, not the EDF. EDF is to reproduce, and the data frame is to just sort of like migrate the one data frame from one project to another. And then like I can select this data frame, which is like a .df, and if I open it, and then all the charts analytics come along with it. There's one problem though. So this one is going to, it focuses on only that data frame. But however, some data frame is like you see here is left joined with other data frames. This data frame itself is not going to bring in another data frame. So in order, for example, see here, I'm getting this error because US state population is missing. And in that case, you need to export sort of like a one by one. So, oops, I opened the same project. I wanted to open the original project. So if, for example, like the original project, if I go here, and if I open, where's the unemployment here? And as you see here is highlighted, there are two data frames are used or reference to produce this data frame. So for example, there's a left join, and I believe there's one of the branch is using another data frame or something. So in that case, you have to export one by one, and then you can import all those data frames into another project. Okay, so that's a data frame import and export. Okay, so next topic is the data source. So data source, we have added a couple things. Number one is when you go to the file data, you notice Amazon S3 and Google Drive. So currently we support only CSV or delimited file and Excel file, but those, as long as you have those files on S3 or Google Drive, then you can directly bring those in. So that's one. And then the local file, there is another cool thing. So let's say if I select the text file or CSV, right? And if I click on this one, and then now what you see is slightly different from before. So this is like a file selection dialog. And then what you can do is, let's say you can change the folder, for example. And then let's say, hey, this is the folder like I'm interested in. Let's say like if I select this like a sales files folder or something, and what I see is that all the files are inside this particular folder. And from here, like used to be, for example, like, hey, you know what, like I want to select this file and click on the import. That will import the CSV as it used to be. So there's nothing different about that particular part. However, the cool thing about this is you can select multiple files and then you can import them at the same time. And when you do so, there are a couple options. So you can import separately. For example, if I click on this import button, what's going to happen is it's going to create 3 data frames. One for 2017 sales, another is 2018, and so on. or you can actually merge them together. So that's the cool part. And then in order to do it, select the files. Like right now, like I'm selecting one by one, or I can click on this all option. This means all the files under this particular folder. And this is actually very useful, like I'm going to show you quickly. But also another way to select it is a condition. This is also convenient because this folder happens to have only sales looks like a similar data set, but sometimes you might have a different type of data set. And then instead of selecting all, you might want to do something like, contains, or for example, start with, and click on apply. And that means any files under this folder, as long as those file name include sales or starts with sales, will be included. And why this is important is because as long as you select import those separately as a separate data frames, then it's not that big of the problem. But especially when you do import and merge, and this is it's going to be a very powerful. So let's try to import and merge. So if I click on this import and merge, assuming these three files have the same kind of structure, meaning the same set of columns, and I'm going to go import and merge, and then this will gives me as the column name is Japanese, so probably most of you guys can't know, but this is actually sales data. And then basically here is three files will be merged. And then what we are seeing is kind of preview data, so not all the data. But here, like when you see here, the folder path and then selected file, this is a condition for selecting files. And then obviously this time is okay, but you might want to skip first couple rows, or you might want to do some kind of treatment for the NA and so on. And if you think it looks good, then you can actually click on the save button. And then I'm gonna just save this data, create that data frame name. I click on the create button, and this has just created one data frame, imported data frame. And then when you look at here, the ID column, as you see, there's three files all merged together. Okay, and then now like I have like 33,701 rows, and then obviously the first column has identification for where the original data coming from. Okay, and then the cool thing here is what happened if I added, this is a folder like I was importing from. What happened like next month or a few weeks later, somebody added the new file, right? And then, hey, you know what? This now like I have the 2020 data. I want to import and then merge together. You can actually do it by clicking on this re-import button. And if I click this, this time it is going to find with this condition. As long as the file name starts with sales, if that file name starts with marketing or something, that file is not going to be more imported. But because that file name starts with sales, so if I click on this re-import button, and what's going to happen is including that file and the import and merge together. So now I have this data is like 51,000 rows with the 2020 data. Okay. Again, this one is an import and merge. So if you have that type of data, that'd be maybe useful. Or as you might have, for example, this is if I select the Excel, and then instead, for example, like if I select the particular folder, and then which, for example, I don't know, maybe like I want to select particular file. If I select something like this, and then click on import, and that will import one by one. So for example, here, this one is like one of the first file, and if I configure it and it looks okay, I can click OK. Or if I want to apply the same setting, then I can click on OK for all. For especially Excel, I would recommend you to go one by one because the sheet is sometimes different. Like, you might want to have like the particular sheet in the first file and the second file, you might want to have this different sheet and so on. Okay, so I'm going to skip for all. I'm not going to import all of them, but importing the data becomes much easier and simpler. And then I have shown only for local file, but even if I saw, okay, yeah, even if you have the Google Drive or Amazon S3, it's basically the same thing. This one by one import or merge import, both of them works the same way with the local files. So if it's Google data, and then Google data case, like basically like you select the folder inside the import dialog, and once you select those files, and after that, it works in the exact same way. Okay. All right, so next topic is just actually a summary view. So in order to do, for example, let's go here. So here's the HR kind of employee data. So each row is each employee, and then all the columns are the attributes for those employees. And then here is the column, let's say like monthly income. Yeah, I like to understand, how the monthly income getting decided in this company. So now, first thing I want to see is like what is that sort of like a relationship between all the variables and this monthly income, and it might have some particular correlation there. So I can click on this correlate button, and it used to be. Something is already selected. Let's assume like nothing was selected, and then if I select the monthly income, and it used to be, it shows the error bar, but now we added 3 mode or 3 types: the aggregation, distribution, uncertainty. Error bar, if you know the error bar or uncertainty stuff, and then you might prefer that one. But sometimes like even if you know it, other folks probably not know it, or you might not be aware of it. Then in that case, you might want to start with aggregation. So this is because the target variable is numerical, so it is using the mean. So for example, this one is easier. So attrition, so the mean monthly income for attrition 2 is, let's use the gender actually. So the female is 6,600 or so, and the male is $6,380 and so. And then the numerical column is the same thing. It's actually the average, except, for example, the age it creates a 10 buckets or points, and then divided by 10, and then each point has it shows the average or mean of monthly income. So numeric column, like you see the line chart, and then the categorical, including character and logical, you see this type of the bar chart. Okay, and then instead of the aggregation is kind of like easier, everybody knows mean or in a way, but distribution is also another cool thing because what's behind that mean or summarized value, right? So this one is shown using a box plot, and then you can kind of compare the like which the distribution by categories. So for example, this one is a job level. Obviously, job level 1, the salary by distribution is way lower compared to this higher job level and so on. But if you know the error bar or confidence interval in this case, then I would recommend you use uncertainty. And then let me just use a sort by R square, which is basically the square of correlation. Then much easier to actually, like, you can understand more deeper level. So for example, here is job level. Obviously, these 2 job roles have much higher monthly income. But then when you compare research director, manager, these difference are significant or not? And you can actually see the confidence interval. In this case, 95% confidence interval. They're not crossing. So therefore, these probably 2 are statistically significant. The difference. But and then so like this kind of confidence interval helps you understand this difference is something that you should be paying more attention on. So I think I would recommend it. But again, we have now three options. And the same thing, if you have the coordinate here, like you can select also the logical. In this case, let's say like if I select the attrition, that shows whether that a given employee has left the company or not. And then I'm gonna sort by the AUC. And then in this case as well, so the uncertainty shows the 55 confidence interval of the ratio and all aggregation. And then you can see the ratio for each category as well. For the ratio case, we don't have the distribution because it's a ratio, so it doesn't really have that one. So you have only these two types. Okay, so that's the summary view. And okay, and the next topic is analytics. So there are three things, and I'm going to do the demo for two, and time series clustering and correlation. So let's start with the time series correlation. Time series correlation is basically something like this. So when you have the data with the time series, so typically let's say you use a line chart and see what's the trends of those data, and then you have a bunch of categories or groups. Let's say the countries or products or segments or whatnot. And then you want to see what are the countries, for example, are similar, trend. It's meaning the similar time, like going up and down, or similar range, movement of the values. And then you can actually cluster based on this sort of like a time series way. So what I mean is, let's say, let's use this data here. I have a livestock data. Okay, here. Oh, there you go. Okay, and then I have already filtered for the pigs productions, and then this is a country. Area has a country, and then this is a category of that livestock, and then here's a value. That's a production value. Okay, and then if I go to the chart. And then I created a line chart. So this shows the production of mean. But if I assign a country or area column here, then now basically I'm seeing maybe like a 30 or so countries production data. And then here is a China, and then China has tons of, a massive amount of the production. So, but when you see around here, and there are a bunch of other countries as well. And here the thing is like, hey, are there any sort of like a similarity among them? And then I want to actually create a cluster and see further analysis on them. And then in the last release, we introduced time series clustering. The way you can actually do is as a step. So for example, you can do from the analytics, maybe from the numeric value here, oh yeah, this value, and then analytics, and then here's the time series clustering. Or you could access from this plus button right-hand side under the analytics and the time series clustering, either way. And then you create a step, and then you get that sort of ID column. Then from there, you can do all sorts of visualization and so on. But we have added that to analytics view. Therefore, you can. It's a little easier to explore. So let's say if I select the time series clustering right here, and then group is the one, in this case, for example, the country. So I'm going to select this area column, which has a country information. And the date and time, this time, year, and you can change the how you want to round that data. This time, this actually data is yearly data, so no matter which one I select, it's going to be yearly. But I'm going to explicitly set that year anyway. And then the value, I'm going to set the value. This can be sales, this can be number of purchases, orders, and whatever. And then here, I can click on Run button. Other columns to keep is if you want to bring on other columns that might have some important information, then you can add, this is one, but if you select one, and then you can select more. For example, if I want to select a continent, I want to select something else, and so on. This is optional. It's not that you might not care at the first time you use it, and you just click on run button, and then this basically runs the algorithm to cluster the countries. And then now the default is three clusters, and then I can actually change that to number. For example, let's say like if I want to create 4 clusters, and I can do it as well. But no matter what, when you see it, like it doesn't really make sense because number one cluster is like just China again, and then a bunch of other countries. So what is that, so special about it? Well, here, this case is kind of like interesting data because China itself has a huge number of the production, and then sort of like everything else, kind of like the value is so small. So therefore, there is a normalized tab. When you go there, this one, by the default, it standardizes the value or normalizes the values or the production value in this case. And then based on the normalized value, it does the clustering. You apply the clustering and try to find a similarity and then separate into similar group, similar countries. But you can turn this on and off. Default is true. So this type of data, I recommend turning it to true. But if you, because then you can see under the normalized tab, you can see sort of like why these are together. So for example, number one cluster is sort of like going up and then came down, and after that seems to be kind of a settle. And then number two is super sort of like high. I mean, even the production amount is smaller compared to especially like a country like China, but the trend is super like sort of like going up. And then the number four is also going up, but they had a huge sort of like a drop around 1980. And number three, I have no idea like what's that. How can I explain this one? It's sort of kind of a noisy area so far. Okay. So you can see sort of a trend, and based on the which way going and up and down, and then like you want to cluster, I think this is a good option. But sometimes more than the trend is you might want to have cluster based on the sort of like actual values. Hey, these are the country with higher sort of sales, these are the country like a medium sales and lower sales. In that case, you don't want to do that normalize. Instead, like you want to cluster based on the original values. Then you can turn this off as well. Okay, but because this one looks it's okay for me, so then I can go to the centers, and then this one shows you the cluster center. So this red color is supposed to be the center of each group, and then based on the center, then all the countries are sort of like kind of came together around it. And then the members, and then you can see which countries are number one cluster, number two, and so on. And then the data validation is actually kind of diagnostic thing. So, as you see here, countries like, let's say, like Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, it's showing a gray color. That's because this country doesn't have the data up to here, 1992. Therefore, it's not appropriate to bring this one into this kind of a clustering mix because um, it doesn't really make sense to sort of like evaluate the similarity with other countries. So those are excluded from the result that you see under like time series tabs. So you see basically only the green countries here. So if you want to see like why particular countries are not included, you might want to check this data validation tab. However, there is a way to fill that NA. For example, this like Uzbekistan, it doesn't have the data, but it doesn't have the data doesn't mean there is no data. Sometimes, hey, NA is actually should be considered as 0 or something like that. In that case, I would recommend you do the data wrangling on the right-hand side to take care of the NA, or you want to feel like more like exploratory mode, then you can actually use this fill NA section. So for example, the beginning, so Uzbekistan doesn't have the value, that case you might want to use fill with 0 or fill with false non-NA values, and then that means this value becomes fill this area, this nothing area with the false value, or set 0 or something like that. And then this one right here, remove groups with NA. So this is now it's set 0.5. So that means if more than 50% of the data is NA, then it gets removed. That's why the Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan are removed, while, for example, country like Singapore is still there, is because the NA area, so the missing value area, is not more than 50%. Okay, and here's a data tab, and then I can, either this one or maybe like a members tab, and then when I have the data like this, then you know what, I can actually want to visualize, see like regional similarity. So I can export and then create a new data frame, and then I can by the way, exported data frame. Create it as a new data frame, and then from here, I can just, let's say, like use the map and what countries. Let's say country is area, and the color is, let's say, the cluster, and then I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And then here, like these are the cluster values. So you see some regional similarities. So for example, number 2 cluster, that was the cluster that the production was kind of highly growing, and that's happened to be this area. Number 4 is also growing, but they saw some drop in the 1980. And then the number 1 was like sort of like it was growing, but then now recently it's kind of like settled down, that type of the countries. So that's what you can see. So either it's up to you. You might want to do as a step, or you might want to do under the analytics view. I would recommend you to use this analytics view to explore first, and then like, if you want to keep running this sort of like a reproducible way or as a production way, and then that's where you might want to do the step, because the step is sort of like, then you can schedule, and then even like the map type of visualization, you can add it on top of the result as well. Okay, so that's the time series clustering. And the next one is the correlation. Correlation is pretty, kind of like a basic in a way, but basically trying to find how given combination of the variables, how they are correlated. So and sometimes this correlation view is about, for example, like, hey, I want to know something about monthly income, and then give me the correlation information with all the other variables. So the relationship is sort of one and many. But sometimes you want to do like every single combinations, and then give me the sort of like most highly coordinated combination of numerical variables or columns and so on. So in that case, you can go to the analytics view, and then I'm going to create a new analytics here, and then select the correlation, and then select all the numerical value or whatever the numerical values you're interested in. So let's say I am interested in, let's say like I'm going to select all the numerical variables. Okay, and then click run button, and then now like I see all the combination. So for example, quickly here is a job level and monthly income that shows 95% or 0.95 correlation. That means very highly positively correlated. And the biggest highest is 1, that's like highest correlation. And this one, -1, is also highest correlation, except that's a negative correlation. So one variable goes up and then the other variable value goes down. So, and that's cool. But now like you can actually click on this button to show the value. And sometimes if you are using, creating presentation slides or something like that, this view might be better, because then you don't have to like go on, move the mouse on each cell to see that number as well. Okay. And then another thing is that we have added the significance tab. When you go there, now each correlation, sort of the strength of the correlation is now shown as a size of the each sort of like a circle. And then, for example, here, the job revenue monthly income, why this size is bigger is because the correlation is 0.95. That's the so bigger the value is, the size is bigger. And also, it doesn't matter the positive or negative. So let's say if this one was like minus 90, 0.95, that's strong correlation. It's just that like a negative correlation. So in that case, you're going to see the same size, except in a different color. It could be blue. So red is positive, blue is negative. But also, you see this gray. So these are based on the p-value, based on the statistical test. And then the p-value is greater than, the default is 5%, and then those combination of the pair will be colored by the gray color. So you might want to focus on like red and then blue color first, and then gray is something that like I'm not going to say like that has not, there's no relationship or anything like that, but it's just that with this data we can't conclude there is meaningful information. And you can change that criteria is not just 5%, like hey, I want to use like 10%, I want to use 0.1%, whatever number is, you can adjust that as well. Okay, so that's a correlation. And also, this is a kind of slight improvement. So when you build a logistic regression, random forest, and XGBoost, and so on, there is a tab called variable importance to help you which variables are more correlated or more important in order to predict the target variable or the changes in target variable target variable. And then so used to be we had only permutation, and then now we added this like another algorithm. Default is still the permutation. Based on our experience, permutation is more stable in order to evaluate the importance of each variable. But this farm is it's very interesting that we are still kind of exploring, and I think this is could be more intuitive, because when you see on the right hand side, when you go to the prediction tab, that is that shows each predicted values for each prediction variable or predictors. So then when you go to the importance and then the default, the permutation one, is what we're really doing is basically to create a model. Each time when we create a model, we remove one of the predictor. So then we evaluate how the performance of the prediction degrade compared to the model with all the variables, right? So that way, it's I think it works easy, kind of makes sense, and then also it's easier to compare with other models with different algorithms. But when you look at here, is for example, right hand side, what it matters, especially for the numerical variables. So the variance of each variable. So for example, right hand side, you see from the top layer on the third from the left, it's called number of company worked. And then in this case, basically, we are trying to predict the attrition. So whether a given employee will leave or not. And then you see that the ratio or probability change a lot with the number of company work compared to the most right-hand side at the top level, environmental satisfaction. That changes, but the variable variance is sort of like a slightly smaller scale. So that means the number of the companies work to change, the ratio change more than the number of environmental satisfaction change. That so this farm, this algorithm called farm or feature importance ranking measure, is really based on the variance of the predicted value of each predictor from each predictor. And then the bigger the variance, that means that has a lot to say in terms of like the change of the target variable. Therefore, it becomes a higher importance under the importance tab. So these two tabs becomes more consistent to each other. So that's why like this algorithm might works better. But based on our experience so far, based on tests, that still we think the original one, the permutation, seems to be producing sort of like more intuitive result. So that's something that like we're still exploring. But so I recommend you to give it a shot as well. Okay, so the rest is a chart and data wrangling side, and then the chart. So let's go step by one by one. So now finally you can sort the stock bar chart based on each sort of like a ratio. So you can do the sort by, and then used to be the sorting based on the original values before the ratio calculation being applied, but now on top of the ratio calculation, you can sort that as well. So the chart will look more intuitive or look better. Another thing is a word cloud. We separated the size and the color, so it becomes more like a grammar base or the same experience when you build in a bar chart and other charts. So now here, like I'm assigning the color by the market, and this is sales data, and then like I assign a sales total to the size. So like you can see this size is based on the sales, and then the difference of the color is because the market is different. And then I can assign numerical columns to color as well. In this case, I've assigned marketing expense to the color. So even though like smaller letters, let's say like right hand side kind of upper area called says Montenegro, it's the size is small because the sales total is small, but marketing expense is higher. Average marketing expense is higher. Therefore, the color is kind of darker blue. So you can actually use two different things visualized together with the word cloud chart now. Okay. And then another thing is this cumulative ratio. I'm not sure like how much of you guys actually know this one. And you can actually do, this is kind of cool because let's say like, hey, I have each market and then I'd like to know like, what are the countries that occupied 80% of the sales, 80% of the sales coming from. Kind of stuff. So typically, you might want to do here is use window calculation. And then instead of using cumulative sum, you can use cumulative sum ratio. Then now it is showing the ratio. And then the ratio is being cumulated from the left to right. And in this view right now, what you're seeing is basically sorted by the alphabetically sorted. So Africa, for example, Algeria, Angola, and Benin, and so on. And then, but Algeria might not have the significant sales amount. So even though this one's showing like 80%, red reference line, and then like, okay, so up to Somalia, like these are the countries to, gives us 80% of the sales. But it doesn't make really sense because what we want to know is like a top sales countries, right? So you can actually use this sort, and that will sort first. Then on top, and start doing a cumulative sum ratio in this case. Then this is really, for example, when you see from the left to right, and then the moment the bar hits the red line, those are the countries that gives us the 80% of the sales, but also the top 80% sales countries. Okay, so that's the, and then another thing, the table. Now you can do the date format. So when you have the date or project CD column, you can apply the date formatting. There are a bunch of options, and also you can set the time zone as well. So that's, I think it's convenient. Okay, and here is a last one that's summarized by row, the data wrangling. So sometimes most of the times when we talk about summarize, usually the kind of column base. So when you have 100 rows, you want to summarize to create just one value, right, on the sales total or average average sales and so on. But sometimes you want to do that on the row base instead of column base. So to do, you could use something, some function like row wise or whatever before, but we wanted to make it simple. So we created this function called summarize row function, and you can actually use it inside create calculation. So inside create calculation, you type summarize row, and it will have the suggestion. So you can select, and then, but the whole point here is that in this case, I'm applying the mean function to calculate the mean of the sales of all these columns from 2012 to 2015. And let me just explain a little quickly here. The summarize row, and then like across, this is kind of a magical thing. But if you have this particular this function, but then inside you can select the columns very flexibly by having this. So inside, for example, in this case, I'm using where is sort of like the kind of condition. Inside, you can use is.numeric to select all the numerical columns, or is.character to say all the character data type columns, and so on. So this where function lets you decide sort of like what type of data type that you want to bring in inside this column selection. And then if you want to actually, you know what, like I want to select column A, column B, column F or something like that, then you can use this C function. And inside, you just select the columns. You will get suggestions, so you don't have to type all the stuff. You can select from the suggestion. But the C is inside the C. You can select the column names. C is actually C stands for concatenate or something like that. Okay, and then another way is you can use starts with function. Then whatever the columns, the whose column names starting with sales or something like that, then you can use this one as well. And then yep. And then use next one is that after the comma, you set the function name. In this case, because I want to calculate mean or average, so I'm using mean. You could use sum or max or mean or median or as a summarized function as well. And then the last part, this one is like na.rm equal true. I recommend you set this, because by setting this, then if you have na values in some of the columns, for example, here, when you see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 from the top, it's called Armenia, has NA for 2013 and 2015. And if you didn't set na.rm equal true, then that you'll get the NA as a calculated result, because it doesn't know like how to do the calculation with NA values. So by setting this na.rm, meaning RM is remove, so remove the NA, and only the remaining values are the one that this is going to use for the summarizing calculation. Okay, so that's the summarized row, and it's pretty useful. And it's almost like a time, but the last one I'd like to talk about is a Exploratory Server. And we have added this subscribe capability or button. So Exploratory Server basically, like you can publish, you can create the data or the chart or dashboard, whatever inside Exploratory desktop, and you can publish and share and schedule and interact with parameters. So publish and open a browser and share. And then also you can find all the published insights and data that you have published before under the My Insights page, or you can find other data and insights that are published by others by going to this search insights or search data page. And then now here's the thing, some of the data or the dashboard or chart gets scheduled. They are scheduled. That means the data gets updated, maybe daily, weekly, monthly, whatever that could be. Then you might want to be notified, right? So let's say like you have the sales dashboard, and then that gets updated every morning or every week or something like that. You want to be notified when the data is updated. And that's when you can click on the subscribe button. By subscribing this, then you will receive this email notification. And you can click on the green button sorry, this is Japanese because my language setting of the Exploratory server is Japanese. So like translated message will be sent, has been sent to me. But you should be getting the English email. Then like, you can click on the green button to open the data or dashboard and so on. Okay, so that's it for the Exploratory version 6.5, and it's already been released. So you can go to our download page, go to the exploratory.io, and you see a download button at the top, menu at the top, and then you can download that as well. Right now, it's only for regular versions, and the public version hasn't been upgraded yet, but we are planning to do it within the next few days. So if you're on a personal or business or community plan, then you can upgrade to version 6.5 today. Okay. All right, so the next week, I'd like to do more like kind of get into more analysis type of data analysis type of seminar. So starting with cohort analysis, and then I'm going to talk about how to calculate and then create the layer cake chart. If you're interested in MRR and also sort of like retention, net revenue retention type of things, I think this is a seminar you want to check in. You can find our seminar from our homepage, Learn an Online Seminar. And then you can also check out our past seminar recordings as well. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you so much. And if you happen to have a question I'd like to answer, so let me know